Good evening, I'm Ian Hanamansi. The eerie skies over southern BC today.
This is just making this worse with COVID. It's making the masks more imperative than ever.
Air quality plummets as smoke from U.S. wildfires clogs the skies. The health risks and when it will clear. The battle to contain those wildfires rages on. Devastation and loss across 3 states. The calm, steady force beside a sometimes fiery prime minister.
It's like I'm part of the team too.
The life and legacy of Hélène Chrétien, and that time she may have saved her husband's life.
I think that I'm lucky that she was there.
The future of performance in a pandemic.
Believe it or not, this is comedy.
Finding new ways to connect.
We're going to have to be innovative and creative and use all our platforms to really push dance in a way that we haven't really had to do before.
This is The National. And we begin with that threatening shroud of smoke engulfing a large swath of British Columbia. It has some groups describing the air quality here as among the worst in the world. And of course, it's from those wildfires along the U.S. coast, creating scenes of horror south of the border and stark landscapes here in BC. Briar Stewart takes an in-depth look and tells us when things will improve.
It's not the typical waterfront view. The sun is blocked, the mountains are obscured, and the masks are now serving a dual purpose.
This is just making this worse with COVID. It's making the masks more imperative to be wearing right now than ever. I just feel for the people down in the United States.
The smoke hanging over Vancouver actually drifted from the U.S. wildfires a couple of days ago, but it first went offshore over the water before being swept back in, and it settled here. Air quality is listed as being very high risk throughout much of the southern part of the province, but it's particularly bad in the southeast interior, where Castlegar has nearly 3 times the amount of fine particulate matter suspended in the air as Vancouver. The smoke there is blowing directly from the wildfires.
It reminds me a little bit of the ocean fog for those people that live along the coastline, where everything goes gray.
Health experts say those with chronic health conditions can be at risk, but everyone is being urged to limit strenuous exercise outside.
When the average adult is at rest, they breathe about 6 liters of air per minute. Once you raise your respiration rate, that can go up to 60 liters of air per minute. So exercise really affects how much smoke you inhale and therefore how exposed you are.
Despite that, a group pushed ahead with a virtual Boston Marathon today after COVID-19 led to the cancellation of the marquee race.
I missed that one, and I don't want to miss this one again after 6 months, so I just went out and did it.
The good news is that the smoke is supposed to start clearing overnight, but climate change means more fires are in the long-term forecast.
We're seeing longer, hotter, drier summers, and because of that, the wildfire risk is expected to be higher in the future, and consequently, we may see more events.
So that could mean more smoke, whether it's from the U.S. or from fires burning on this side of the border. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Vancouver.
Oh, for more on this, let's bring in our CBC News meteorologist, Johanna Wagstaff. And Joe, let's start with the health concerns associated with this smoke.
Well, Ian, the problem with wildfire smoke is that the particles are so small that the fine particulate matter can easily get into your throat, your lungs. You can feel it in your eyes and nose. I feel it right now in my throat standing out here. And this is how we measure the air quality. The higher the particulate matter, the worse the air quality. We're seeing some of the worst readings anywhere in the world over the past couple of days.
You know, I've been living in and amongst this for a few days. Still can't believe what I'm seeing over your shoulder there. Any sense as to when we can expect the clear skies to return?
This is the big question, and we're really hoping we'll get a bit of a westerly flow. You can see from the satellite we've been getting winds coming up from the south, drawing in all that smoke towards a low pressure system off the coast. Hopefully things will mix out on Monday, and some Tuesday rain could really change the game and clear things out for us.
And unfortunately, I guess we should expect to see more incidents like this over the years.
That's right. With climate change, our wildfire seasons everywhere are longer, hotter, and drier. The 2017-2018 back-to-back record fire seasons here in BC, that was really the last time we saw air quality this bad. And it was then that climate scientists were saying, this is our new normal. And in the future, whether it's fire here or south of the border or prescribed burning to keep fire from escalating, there is no smoke option in the future, I'm afraid.
Johanna, always nice to have you on the show. Thanks. Now to the source of all that smoke, the dozens of wildfires raging in the western United States. And like so much of what happens in the U.S., those fires have become political. Here's Paul Hunter.
After day upon day of intense heat fueling the monster flames, today cooler temperatures, calmer winds, and a chance for some to survey what remains of neighborhoods left behind. A now charred and grotesque landscape. Consider just the numbers. Dozens of fires up and down the U.S. Pacific coast. More than 16,000 square kilometers now burnt, with evacuation orders in place in 6 states. The air in Portland, Oregon is now the worst ever recorded.
We've got fires on the coast. We've got fires in communities right abutting our metropolitan areas, and Southern Oregon has been devastated.
Tomorrow, Donald Trump will visit another hard-hit state, California, to assess the destruction for himself. Last night, before a largely mask-free crowd at a campaign rally in Nevada, the president underlined his view of what's led to the fires.
You know, it is about forest management. Please remember the words, very simple. Forest management, please remember that.
Trump, who regularly questions the science of climate change and has rolled back environmental regulations in this country while pressing for more oil and gas drilling, was today slammed for failing to blame climate change for what's happening on the West Coast.
And we know that climate change is making fires start easier, spread faster, and intensify. And it is maddening right now that when we have this cosmic challenge to our communities with the entire west coast of the United States on fire, to have a president to deny that these are not just wildfires, these are climate fires.
Back amid the ashes, the return to what was but is no more continues in places where there's nothing left even to burn. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
For the many Canadians living where confirmed COVID-19 cases are on the rise, the habits and health strategies forged in the pandemic are being put to the test. In Ontario and Quebec over the past month, the rates of new cases have roughly doubled, both provinces reporting more than 200 for 3 straight days. Quebec hasn't seen rates like this since early June, when new cases were falling amid heightened restrictions and concern. Jayla Bernstein shows us it's a different situation now.
Quebec's lower St. Lawrence region is facing a surge in cases. The local director of public health says people are confused about the rules. He says in the last couple of weeks, people have been getting together and partying, adding to the rise in cases. This bar in Rimouski was the latest in a series of outbreaks linked to bars in the province. But many bars are being cautious.
We want our customers to be safe, and we want our employees to be safe as well.
Inside this resto bar, there's hand sanitizer and a sign-in sheet, mandatory as of this weekend to make sure all customers are logged. This owner says keeping bars is safer than the alternative.
Private parties and houses and everything else, us at least, we impose the conditions to our customers.
As of this weekend, Quebec has added fines of up to $6,000 for people who refuse to wear masks inside public spaces. That didn't go over so well with anti-mask protesters. Thousands marched in Montreal Saturday, promoting conspiracy theories and accusing the government of overreacting to the pandemic. Guests at this bar have no doubt the virus is real, but the protocols make them feel at ease dining out for now.
I might not even be able to come and visit my friends in Montreal in November or December, so we try to take the chance when we can right now.
I'm pretty sure we're going to decrease the number of times we can see each other, so it's better to stay safe, stay home, just in case.
I don't do this every day, so I took advantage to see my friends. I feel okay.
For now, people here are holding on to what passes for normal as long as it lasts. Jayla Bernstein, CBC News, Montreal.
In Ontario, the rate of new cases is particularly high in Peel region, west of Toronto. And as Farah Morali reports, it's driven demand for online learning so high, so fast, those classes have been pushed back.
Okay, and you want to make sure it's covering your nose.
Jill Promoli has watched nervously as COVID-19 cases have rapidly increased in Peel region. She made the difficult decision to send her kids back to the classroom.
Heard a lot of stories from friends where their class numbers started one way last week and have gone up just in recent days as things have changed and shuffled. Oh, you popped it off.
Promoli knows more than most that school safety is a matter of life and death. 4 years ago, her son Jude died after being infected with the flu. He caught it from his sister, who got it from a classmate.
For us, we've been sort of going through everything now with COVID-19, remembering that it's not just what happens in the classroom, it's what comes home again.
In just a week, 10,000 students in the Peel District School Board have moved from in-class to online learning, delaying the start of online classes.
That workplace outbreak.
The region's medical officer of health says most of the new cases are isolated to workplaces and social gatherings.
As opposed to really widespread propagated community transmission, which is more what we were seeing in March and April. So that tends to bring the risk down a bit more in returning children to in-person learning.
Peel isn't the only Ontario school board where parents have recently decided to shift their kids to online learning. The Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board saw an increase of 3,500 students since late August, and in Hamilton Wentworth, the numbers jumped by 2,000 students. This infectious disease specialist believes the risk of in-class learning is manageable.
In all the countries that have really good data on school return, schools are not the drivers of community transmission. It's the community that's the issue.
Because she's a caterpillar, right?
Promoli's kids start their first full day in class this week, and watching the numbers isn't making that decision any easier. Farah Morali, CBC News, Toronto.
In the space of 24 hours, the WHO says the world recorded more than 300,000 new COVID-19 infections, a record. And the country contributing the most to that number, India. It now averages more than 94,000 new cases a day, a record for any country over the course of the pandemic. But India is moving ahead with relaxing restrictions, even as cases rise in both rural and urban areas. France reported another 7,100 cases just a day after breaking its own one-day record of more than 10,000 new cases. France is one of several European countries facing a resurgence of the virus. In a bid to stop another general lockdown, France is moving to clamp down on hotspots with targeted measures. In Melbourne, Australia, anti-lockdown protesters clashed with police. 74 people were arrested. Demonstrators believe the pandemic is being exaggerated. The response, an unjust restriction of freedoms. Tomorrow, we'll see the first election in Canada since the pandemic began. New Brunswickers will be going to the polls as Blaine Higgs hopes to turn his minority government into a majority. Kayla Hounsell has this look at campaigning in the age of COVID-19.
It might look like a typical election campaign from afar, but it has been anything but.
Other than just like people standing on the side of the road waving signs.
Polling stations have been set up with directional arrows and sanitizer. Masks are encouraged, but not required.
A snap election that's only 28 days long being held during a global pandemic definitely presented a number of challenges.
The province's chief electoral officer says some of the usual polling stations weren't available. That led to accessibility issues. There's also been a dramatic increase in mail-in ballots, which take time to process.
It's usually just a few hundred mail-in ballots across the province, and every single returning office in the province is processing several hundred.
Incumbent Premier Blaine Higgs has been praised for his handling of COVID-19. New Brunswick currently has 2 active cases.
He's done a good job as far as I'm concerned.
He's up against the Liberals' Kevin Vickers, known to Canadians as the Sergeant at Arms who took down the gunman who stormed Parliament Hill in 2014. Higgs has faced some criticism for calling an election during the pandemic.
I think it's dangerous.
If people are doing it responsibly, like making sure you're keeping a distance, wearing masks, I think I can feel safe that way.
New Brunswickers were encouraged to vote early, and they did in record numbers. Still, Elections New Brunswick is warning if pandemic restrictions create long lines at polling stations and mail-in ballots continue to trickle in large numbers, that could delay results on election night. Kayla Hounsel, CBC News, St. John.
Tonight, people are mourning the death of Hélène Chrétien, longtime wife of former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien.
I said she was a quiet and benevolent force. You know, she was never behind Mr. Chrétien. She was always by his side.
I don't know whether Mr. Chrétien would agree with me, but I don't think he would have become prime minister without her at his side. She was really a very important anchor in his life.
Hélène Chrétien died peacefully at her home yesterday morning, surrounded by loved ones. She was 84 years old. Rosemary Barton looks back on her life and how she's being remembered.
By all accounts, Hélène Chrétien was always the quiet strength behind her husband. But she was also an astute political partner who Jean Chrétien called his most trusted advisor.
I said she is the rock of Gibraltar. She tells it to me as it is. And it's better for me to listen.
From the very beginning, Hélène Chrétien knew the man who would become Canada's Prime Minister for a decade was the one for her. They met on a Shawinigan bus and married not long after in 1957, a ceremony squeezed in between Jean's shifts working at the local mill and his university classes. Hélène Chrétien dropped out of school at 16 to support her family and did secretarial work. But her dreams were much grander. She longed to travel overseas and learn multiple languages, dreams that would become possible in part because of the Chrétiens' political success. With that success, though, came the spotlight. And while family was always important to Madame Chrétien, it was also always deeply private. And she tried to keep her 3 children out of the public eye in their younger years.
I'm not running after the cameras, so maybe that's why.
Hélène remained humble about her life, her beginnings, and her contributions. Yet she was there for her husband and political partner, and always willing to give advice.
We are always talking, you know, when I have lunch, breakfast at night. Sometimes I sit in his office and he says, you know what, today I have a cabinet meeting to do, I have this. It's like I'm part of the team too. And sometimes the team is there and I'm there. So he will say, well, what do you think about that? And I give him my advice.
She also may have saved her husband's life on at least one now famous occasion. An intruder managed to break into 24 Sussex in 1995. And as her husband slept, Hélène Chrétien confronted the man and locked the door to their bedroom before the RCMP arrived.
My wife did not panic. She just stared at the door. And she locked the door and rushed to lock the other door. And she called the police. And I think that I'm lucky that she was there.
For as outgoing and hot-tempered as her husband could be, Hélène Chrétien was the calm and collected political partner who was happy to stick to the sidelines.
Will you miss the pomp and ceremony?
Never.
But she took unending pride in what they accomplished together, and she believed Canadians would come to miss her husband and value his legacy when he left office.
I would be just happy if they say he was working hard for his people, and he was a good prime minister.
The success of their political partnership perhaps only exceeded by their personal one. Hélène and Jean Chrétien were married for 63 years. Rosemary Barton, CBC News, Ottawa.
An Eastern New Brunswick community is mourning the loss of 3 teenagers. They were in that car, the witnesses say, went off the road and hit a retaining wall. All 3 victims were ejected and killed. At their high school, flags were lowered to half-mast today. And in Toronto, a man in his 60s is dead after being stabbed outside a mosque on Saturday evening.
The community is in shock, is in grief, in denial, and we're waiting for the police investigations.
The International Muslims Organization of Toronto said the victim is one of its members. He also worked at the mosque as a caretaker. Police say he was stabbed in the neck. The suspect, a man wearing a black hoodie and dark pants, was seen fleeing the scene on foot. Police haven't said anything about a motive. It has been months since a Ukrainian airliner was shot down by Iran. On board, 55 Canadian citizens and 30 permanent residents. Their families launched 2 class action lawsuits against Iran, and this weekend Tehran responded. Ashley Burke now with what they said and what happens next.
This is how Habib Hadju tries to take his mind off what happened. But 8 months on, he says his loss has only become more painful with time.
They are my loved ones. Without them, I feel the whole world is shattered for me.
His daughter Saranaz and his 8-year-old granddaughter Elsa died when Iran fired 2 missiles at Flight 752 in January. Their family is part of one of the proposed class action lawsuits seeking justice. This month, the Canadian government served the paperwork to Tehran. But on Friday, Iran's foreign ministry rejected the lawsuits, saying the Canadian court has no jurisdiction in the case and all judicial proceedings will be conducted inside Iran.
I would prefer it if Iran would defend the claim. If they did, we would have access to all of their documents surrounding this terrible tragedy.
He says Iran has until the end of October to defend itself or else.
If they don't defend, they are deemed under the procedural rules in Ontario to admit the truth of all of the facts set out in the claim. And the truth of the facts are that we allege that the shooting of 2 missiles against this aircraft is an act of terrorism.
The lawsuits are seeking compensation not just from the Iranian government, but specific individuals and the Ukrainian airline. So far, each family has received a one-time $25,000 payment from the Canadian government for immediate support.
I don't really want to live. The only reason I'm breathing, I want justice.
Habib Hadju says for his family, the lawsuit isn't about money. It's about holding Iran to account for a tragedy he doesn't want forgotten. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Minor hockey leagues across the country are preparing for a return to the ice.
Hockey went off in March, and it's not like in September we're just going to turn that switch right back on.
Up next, what the pandemic means for Canada's game. And later, a look at the future of performance.
Welcome to my living room, the crowded room.
How artists are getting creative and adapting to a new form of live entertainment. Plus, inside the Atlantic bubble.
I don't think they should open the bubble.
Containing the virus while keeping the rest of the country out. We'll be right back. For hundreds of thousands of Canadian kids, winter means minor hockey. But in this age of a pandemic, how can the rite of passage be kept safe? As Jamie Strachan explains, planning for a return to play involves a lot of creativity.
Hockey went off in March, and it's not like in September we're just going to turn that switch right back on.
It's more like a dimmer, and as president of one of the largest hockey associations in Toronto, Susan Irving has spent a lot of time planning a return to the ice.
I think everyone has to realize that, there's going to be a lot of change with hockey, and change is difficult.
For most, hockey won't start until October, and then only for practice. It's unknown when games against other teams can start.
Now, there's no one back on the ice playing hockey just yet, but let me give you a sense of what it's going to look like using this table hockey game. For starters, forget 5-on-5 hockey. For most age groups, it's going to be 4-on-4 or even 3-on-3. There'll be no face-offs, and there won't be 3 periods, but 2 longer ones. Each team will start a period with possession of the puck. Same for goals. No face-off. The scored-upon team will simply get the puck. There will be penalties, but no one will be sitting in the penalty box. Instead, a penalty shot.
All of these things are part of the Greater Toronto Hockey League's return to play guidelines. The world's largest minor hockey league is cautiously stepping back on the ice.
There's a lot of unknowns for us to be able to say we're going to be back for sure by this date. I can say we want to be back to traditional hockey as soon as we can, but that as soon as it can will only be when it's safe.
It's how provincial organizations across the country are moving forward. All plans a little different, but with the same goals.
I think everyone is suffering a little bit from COVID fatigue there. It's important for us not to take our foot off the brake here, and to ensure that we all put in the necessary protocols as in physical distancing.
There are other changes as well. Players will mostly dress at home, and no body contact allowed at any level.
Changing the game in terms of physical contact is going to be really, really hard for kids because it's just part of the game. So we're going to really have to lean in on our coaches to really educate.
And arenas will be eerily quiet. No parents huddled together cheering and yelling. Parents can still help do up skates, but most provinces want only 1 spectator per player. All part of the slow process of restarting Canada's game. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
After the break, is it time to burst the Atlantic bubble? How those provinces feel about the strategy. But first,
the more I did these videos, that wanted to see these videos, people that were, missing live performance.
Returning to the stage during a pandemic, we explore the future of performance in 2020 and beyond. We didn't see 2020 coming. The coronavirus and COVID-19 have dramatically changed our world. The way we work, the way we learn, even the way we play. Navigating these present realities, death, distancing, the divisions apparent in who is bearing the brunt of COVID, all of it can show us powerful lessons for the future. New directions for schools, offices, and public health. So this week, The National is looking at the future and where we could go from here. Tonight, the future of performance. With COVID shutting stages across the country, artists find new ways to connect with audiences. An artist on stage, that sometimes magical bond with an audience, now lost. Tonight, my conversations with several artists, all of them struggling to reach their audiences and, frankly, to make a living. They share with us what it's done to their sense of identity and how they're trying to find new chances in a pandemic.
They want to keep it fun, they want to keep it safe.
If you're a country music fan, you may have seen Corb Lund in concert, but you've never seen him like this.
Hey, you guys heard that Corb Lund is here tonight?
Howdy, Saskatchewan, how are you? Everyone in the balconies, how you doing, folks? This is unusual. So this is our first show back, so thanks for coming to see us. Appreciate it. When the oil stops, everything stops, nothing left in the fountain. Nobody wants paper money, son, so you just stop counting. Can you break the horse? Can you light the fire?
After months of concerts being canceled by COVID, some creative thinking has led him here. What's it been like for you since then?
Well, it's been kind of a double-edged sword. We made a really good record, and I'm going to plug it. It's called Agricultural Tragic, but it's one of our better records, and we can't tour it, so that's the problem. But if you put those things, if I can compartmentalize those things, it's been a pretty good summer because, like I said, I don't usually get to spend time at home, and I've been writing a lot and playing a lot of music and catching up with the family.
You're in a parking lot at a hotel in Regina about to do a gig. How does that feel?
Well, it's actually kind of exciting because me and the guys haven't played for 4 months exactly almost, so it'll be pretty fun. Well, she's never not had horses and she don't know what to do. The situation, I'm not sure if you'll describe it to people, but they've got a wall, the back wall of the hotel, every room has a balcony, and so we're sort of in the parkade roof below it, so we're playing up to them. The Beatles played on the rooftop and played down to people. We're playing up to them. When you break the horse, can you light the fire? What's that? I beg your pardon. You best start thinking where your food comes from, and I hope you tend a good garden. Have a good weekend.
For stand-up comics, cramming audiences into small clubs just isn't an option these days. Ivan, how are you?
Hello, I'm well.
Slightly unusual circumstances here. Two of Canada's best, Ivan Decker in Vancouver and Ali Hassan in Toronto, are still figuring out how to connect with their fans.
We are ready and rolling. Thank you. Here we go.
Everything's great. I can hear you.
So let's talk about comedy in 2020. We're months into the pandemic now. Ivan, what's it been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, for the longest time, I was retired, effectively. There was nowhere to perform. There were no shows happening. Everything just, it was very sudden. Like, you know, all the clubs just immediately closed their doors.
Yeah, I mean, I remember early May, my daughter was no school, and she was just like, I don't know who I am anymore. And then a month later, I was saying that myself. I was like, who am I? If I'm not a comedian, I'm not an actor. I guess I'm an occasional broadcaster at the CBC, but you know, that's not a good business card, occasional broadcaster.
Or even broadcaster, either way, not a good thing on the card.
Yeah.
Each of you guys took part in a Just for Laughs drive-in show in Montreal.
Fine, don't want to stop? Shooting pain through your body. How do you like that?
So what was it like?
I really, really enjoyed that. And it's not something you would have accepted or at the very least enjoyed last year at this time. But now you had a group of comedians, really strong Canadian comedians, hungry to perform, and the audience were people who were hungry for entertainment and for laughter, and it was a beautiful mesh. I mean, it did something for my soul.
Wow. So you've done one show here already, one physically distant show.
Yeah.
How did it work?
It worked okay.
Believe it or not, this is comedy. This is the last bastion of live entertainment. You can't go see anything else. Did you know that? Every other live sports, it's all illegal. This is the only thing you're allowed to come and see. I don't have to do well. You have no other options.
You know, with 20 people, that's enough for comedy to happen. I'd say it's like the minimum amount.
This might be the reality for a year or two. So how are you going to make it work?
Yeah, I'm thinking of getting into drywalling. I really don't know how anyone can see this unbelievably unpredictable, unprecedented situation and know exactly where this is going to go.
So far, in all of these socially distant shows that I've seen or been involved in, they haven't had any trouble getting people to come, which is a great sign. You know, that indicates that this is something, this art form is something that people want to have happen and want to continue.
Welcome, welcome to my backyard.
Singer-songwriter Jill Barber has been performing for nearly 20 years.
Never, ever quit loving you.
And while the pandemic has, for the most part, kept her off stage, it is, perhaps to her own surprise, opening some new doors. Had you done an online show before?
No, I was really reticent to do an online show. To me, at first I thought it would feel really disconnected from the audience. I didn't like the idea of performing to a computer screen.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to my living room. It's a little different for all of us, right? Strange times.
Stealing glances across a crowded room and taking a chance or two.
This is a new way for all of us to enjoy a live musical show.
Of knowing what to do.
So it's different than a dark theater where the audience is in darkness and nobody's looking at them. They were really kind of part of the show.
I invited folks to get in touch with me with your stories.
How are you?
Hi, Deborah. Hi,
Hello.
Tiago.
How are you?
Thank you so much for your email.
When I hear the song, give me strength that I need to leave my country and fight for our relationship.
I'm so thrilled. I'm so thrilled that that is the case. And I really appreciate you sharing that with me because
these are strange and emotional times for people, and we all long to connect with one another. And when we open up, other people open up as well.
If you don't mind, just before you go away, won't you kiss me one more time?
Thank you, everybody.
It has been a difficult and isolating time for National Ballet soloists Tanya Howard and Sept November, as they look for any outlet possible to continue to dance and move. So Ian here in Vancouver, welcome to both of you. Thank you very much for doing this.
Thanks for having us, yeah.
And let me start with this. How important is it for you to be performing in front of an audience?
The audience was such a mirror for us when they would stand or when they would gasp. I mean, when you hear the audience gasp, you're like, oh my gosh, they get it, we did it. So that reflection, once that is stripped from you, you really have to look inside in a different way.
The more time we were away from the stage in the studio, you start to feel a little lost. Who am I without my work? I always say I'm a dancer, you know, and so it's like if I can't dance, then what am I?
CPay, for you, you have the Instagram videos. I don't know if that's a short-term thing or if you see that turning into something bigger. What can you do over the next few months to keep your career going?
There's an audience out there. The more I did these videos, that wanted to see these videos, people that were, you know, missing live performance. I think now what's happening is this merging of film and dance, photography, so that we bring dance into the digital space. We're gonna have to be innovative and creative and use all our platforms to really push dance in a way that we haven't really had to do before.
So lots of creativity, but as you can tell, none of the artists we talked to have found really a replacement for what they did before the pandemic. All of them, though, say they'll keep trying to figure out the future of performance. When we come back, life inside the Atlantic bubble.
How are you doing up there? Does that work okay?
What the ongoing restrictions mean for outsiders who want in. And later, finding ways around a ban on singing, one teacher's solution to a pandemic problem.
I'm Josh Block. Tomorrow on CBC's daily news podcast Front Burner, in the wake of political controversy, We Charity is shutting down its Canadian operations. We look at the meteoric rise and the unexpected fall of We Charity. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Atlantic Canadians consider their region a welcoming place, but right now it is being very restrictive about who can come in without isolating for 14 days. The 4 provinces walled themselves in together, successfully limiting the spread of COVID-19. But is it time to burst that Atlantic bubble? Here's Tom Murphy.
For the kids, the game goes like this. Trying to keep the bubble from bursting as long as you can. Bubbles are supposed to be fun. But these days, any talk of bursting the Atlantic bubble is almost considered to be sacrilegious.
I don't want to burst the bubble, not yet, no.
I don't think they should open the bubble.
I feel very safe in the Atlantic bubble.
Here's how it works. With few exceptions, if you travel into the bubble from outside Atlantic Canada, you must self-isolate for 14 days.
How do you feel about the Atlantic bubble?
Yeah, we're a little bubble.
We're in the best bubble you can get.
And let's face it, there's a global pandemic on, but things are sailing along pretty well here inside this force field. People wear masks some places, like on the ferry, but life is otherwise pretty normal here. Only a few active cases, no community spread, and plenty of freedom. And a recent poll suggests the vast majority of Atlantic Canadians have no interest in bursting the bubble. Yes, people inside the Atlantic bubble feel like they've somehow been fortified.
Do you like the idea of the Atlantic bubble?
Yeah, actually it's totally good because I think Nova Scotia had the better situation than Ontario.
Welcome to BEI. You have your documentation.
Before July, for the most part, Atlantic Canada's borders were closed. Then the provinces decided to open up to each other, but only each other.
You have your self-declaration form?
Just some paperwork and an ID check.
The carpet has been rolled out. You're very, very welcome.
And then the royal treatment. So are you feeling tempted to enter the bubble?
Do you want to try opening your window there?
Well, consider Brynne Chastelain, university student from Ontario, one of thousands who were stuck in a mandatory 14-day quarantine in Halifax.
How are you doing up there? Does that work okay?
Friends deliver groceries to his door.
But as much as I'm getting outside these days.
But no one can take away the boredom, growing by the day. And this is only day 12. Talk about a university initiation.
Would love to be able to feel like I could go back to visit family in Ontario whenever I want to. But at the same time, I think this is one of the safest areas in North America right now. But I am hopeful at some point that I'll be able to get back and see some family.
But when? Premiers and public health officials in Atlantic Canada have been sounding downright protective about opening borders.
I believe it would be premature today to be considering a further loosening of our border restrictions.
We don't have any timelines to make changes.
There's considerable fear, I would say.
Ongoing requirements for a quarantine.
So will the bubble ever burst?
So you just go inside, bring photo ID.
Turns out the incoming university students could actually be the canary in the coal mine, so to speak.
This has been a journey that the province has
according to Nova Scotia Premier Stephen McNeil.
We think that the fact that we're welcoming thousands of young people from across the country will allow us to get a sense of the mobility of that virus. We're very encouraged by the fact that the system is working.
What are the conditions?
But for some in business, the bubble can't open fast enough. Don Mills, business owner and former pollster, says it's time to prick it.
We think we're safe from the world in Atlantic Canada. We are safe from the world in one respect. In another respect, our economy is being, really hard hit.
The economy everywhere in this country has been hard hit, and the bubble has some people questioning whether the fundamentals of nationhood means being in this together. The protectionist bubbling is unprecedented. Is it unconstitutional? It's something Ottawa legal expert, aka bubble outsider, Errol Mendez, has been researching.
Have we ever had anything like this in Canada before?
No, and hopefully we won't for another 100 years, but this is a very unusual situation. And
He's parsed the nitty-gritty and thinks a legal challenge would be iffy.
As long as governments can provide cogent scientific and public health reasons for limiting those rights, they are constitutional. I know that others disagree, but this is my firm conviction.
Which is exactly what they want to hear back in the bubble room.
They're not trying to be mean. I don't believe anybody's. They're just trying to keep it contained.
Tom Murphy, CBC News, Halifax.
Next, how one classroom went from singing to signing.
They had their masks on, and then when they all signed together, I thought, wow, something different can be very beautiful too.
A new tradition for our new normal. An Ontario teacher, like so many others across the country, has been trying to find ways to make this school year feel a little more normal. If it weren't for the pandemic, the grade 3 and 4 students in her class would be singing "O Canada" every morning at school. Now, with their masks on, their hands are signing instead, and that is our moment.
Principal plays O Canada every morning, and he asks us all to stand but not to sing. Well, that's very hard for kids who have been accustomed to doing the same thing every day. I decided right after the principal played O Canada that I would play them a YouTube version of O Canada, and I had them watch it, and then we practiced signing it a few times. They had their masks on, and then when they all signed together, I thought, wow, something different can be very beautiful too. So I think that's why all the feedback from teachers was that it just really touched a lot of people, because our little sweethearts have had to adapt to doing things differently, but they're really resilient.
I think we're going to hear lots of stories of innovative teachers and sweetheart kids who are adapting to this time in the pandemic. And I would suggest to you that you go to the CBC News website. There's a story about Nigel Howard, the guy who signed during the health news conferences in Canada, in BC. And he says signing is just another language, and more people should learn it. That is the National for September the 13th. Good night.